Avernus Life and the Flowering Buds is a normal trap card. Target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of earth monsters you control with different names that was special summoned from the graveyard. Return earth monsters you control to the hand equal to the number of targets, and if you returned at least one to the hand, return the targeted cards to the hand. You can only activate one Avernus Life and the Flowering Buds per turn. The Avernus Life archetype likes to work in recovering earth monsters and can work alongside each other and almost grant their abilities into these earth monsters, and they can be generally anything. Since these are revived from the graveyard, they then help to trigger off other effects such as the ones that include their spell and trap support. For this one, just by targeting face-up cards your opponent controls, this has to be equivalent up to the number of monsters that you currently have with different names that had been special summoned from the graveyard. Those earth monsters go back to your hand, equal to the number of targets, and then you get to return those targets your opponent controls back to the hand. This is like a mass compulsory evacuation device style of effect, and it's a good way of disrupting your opponent. Since it's a trap card, it does have to be set first, and so your opponent does have an opportunity to get rid of this before you can maximize on its effect. But otherwise, you're able to just return a number of face-up cards the opponent controls. It's quite decent as it can apply to both your opponent's monsters, their spells, and their trap cards. The disadvantage is if your opponent has a mixture of spell and trap cards that have to be face-up and face-down, say with monsters, you're only able to go for the face-up cards, and therefore they can respond by any other form of negation, or they might not necessarily care about what you're sending back, as the better cards they've got might be those that are set already. Avernus Life and the Thorium Mountains is a attribute fairy type level 3 with 1100 attack and 0 defense. You can discard this card and one monster or Avernus Life card, draw one card. Then you can special summon one earth monster from your graveyard. Also, you cannot activate non-earth monsters effects for the rest of this turn. You can target one Avernus Life monster you control. It can make a second attack during each battle phase this turn. You can only use each effect of Avernus Life of the Thorium Mountains once. By discarding this card and additional monster, you're able to just draw a card as well as special summon an earth monster from the graveyard, so it has viable effect. You are limited to only being able to activate the effects of earth monsters for the duration of the turn, but that's very much keeping within its archetype's theme. By targeting a Avernus Life monster you control, it's able to make an additional attack during each battle phase this turn. And this doesn't have to be on monsters, it can be also on direct attacks. You'll find out later that the Avernus Life archetype are able to treat earth monsters as though they're Avernus Life monsters as well, and therefore this effect could then apply onto those attribute monsters as well, not just purely its own in-archetype theme. Avernus Life of the Mystic Seedlings is an earth attribute, fairy type level 3, with 400 attack and 800 defense. All monsters on the field lose 600 attack points, except Avernus Life monsters. You can discard this card and one monster or one Avernus Life card. You cannot activate non-monster effects for the rest of this turn. Also add one Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand, except Avernus Life of the Mystic Seedlings. Then you can special summon one Earth monster from your graveyard. You can only use this effect of Avernus Life of the Mystic Seedlings once per turn. As soon as this card's on the field, it just lets you reduce the attack points of all monsters on the field by 600, except other Avernus Life monsters. By discarding this card and a monster or one Avernus Life card, you are unable to activate non-Earth monster effects for the duration of the turn, but you can search for an Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand. That's pretty much all of the archetype, and then you can special summon an Earth monster from the graveyard. So the first part of the effect suppresses monsters, the other one helps to search for your attribute monsters and also recover from the graveyard. One of the downsides on this card is even though you can force your opponent to lose attack points, it's only got 400 attack points, so even with its effect, a monster with as little as 1100 attack could still get over this card, even after applying its deduction effect. Avernus Life of the Flourishing Hills is an Earth attribute fairy type level 4 with 200 attack and 2000 defense. Avernus Life monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. You can discard this card, add one monster or Avernus Life card, add one Avernus Life card from your deck to your hand, except Avernus Life of the Flourishing Hills. Then you can special summon one Earth monster from your graveyard. Also, you cannot activate non-Earth monster effects for the rest of this turn. You can only use this effect of Avernus Life of the Flourishing Hills once per turn. This seems particularly weak as it only has 200 attack points and it's more of a defensive tool. Provided you have Vernicified monsters that you control, they cannot be destroyed by card effects, so it does provide some sort of protection. By discarding this card and additional monster, whether that be just a generic monster or another Vernicified card, you can add a Vernicified card from your deck to your hand, so it can be either it's another monster, a spell, or a trap card. It's not fussy. And then you're able to special summon an Earth monster from the graveyard. You are unable to activate non-Earth monsters effects, but that's in keeping with how the archetype operates. Vernicified of the Awakening Forest is an Earth attribute fairy type level 4 with 900 attack and 1800 defense. You can discard this card and one monster or Vernicified card, send from your deck to the graveyard one Earth monster that can be normal summoned or set. Then you can special summon one Earth monster from your graveyard with a different name from that monster. Also, you can activate non-Earth monsters effects for the duration of this turn. You can target one Vernicified monster you control, its attack becomes doubled until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Vernicified of the Awakening Forest once per turn. As soon as you can discard this card and additional monster, you can send a card from the deck to the graveyard, so that's a way of foolish barreling something that you might need later. Then you're able to provide an additional summon and revival of an Earth monster that has a different name from that monster that's been sent to the graveyard. This is so that you can't just simply pitch what you want and then recover what you want immediately. It also has the opportunity to target a Vernicified monster that you control, and its attack points become doubled. I don't think that's too impressive, as you almost need a load of monsters already on your field in order to make it somewhat decent. For example, one of the monsters has 1100 attack points. Even when doubled, it only has 2200 attack points, and is pretty much going to be getting over maybe some level 4s, possibly some level 5 monsters. Vera, the Vernicified Goddess, is a Earth attribute fairy type level 8 with 2400 attack and 3000 defense. Once per turn, when a monster effect is activated by your opponent, resolves. If you control 5 or more Earth monsters, you can negate that effect, and if you do, destroy that card. You can only use each of the following effects of Vera, the Vernicified Goddess, once per turn. You can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, take control of it, and if you do, it becomes Earth. During your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can target one Earth monster in your graveyard, special summon it. This is intended as the boss monster of the archetype. It is the goddess, so it's very much like a deity for it. It has decent attack points for a level 8 with 2400 and much better defense points at 3000, and provided once per turn when a monster effect is activated by your opponent, so long as you have 5 or more Earth monsters, that effect is negated and that monster is then destroyed. You might be thinking to yourself, how are you going to be able to get those 5 monsters on the field, considering we only have a restriction of 6 monster zones? You know, you've got the 5 main monster zones and the 1 extra monster zone. Well, the answer is also in keeping with this card's effect, because you're able to take a face-up monster your opponent controls, and it becomes an Earth attribute, so that's one condition of bringing something that will treat itself as an Earth attribute. The other is that during your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can just target an Earth monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So even within this card's effect, pretty much within a turn or 2 of it being summoned, you're going to have at least 3 monsters on the field, most likely more when you consider the other Vernicified monsters and abilities. Vernicified Corona is a continuous spell card. Its effect is all Earth monsters you control are also treated as Vernicified monsters. Once per turn, if you would discard a Vernicified monster and one card to activate the effect of that Vernicified monster in your hand, you can discard only that Vernicified monster instead. This is meant to be kind of the main card for the archetype, which helps to support it in a couple of different ways. All of your Earth monsters that you control are also treated as Vernicified monsters, and therefore any effects that can apply to Vernicified monsters can therefore apply onto those cards. And provided you have a discard effect of the Vernicified card, you're able to just use that as discard rather than having to discard it plus an additional monster to trigger its effect. Vernicified in Full Bloom is a field spell card. The effect is all monsters you control gain 1000 attack while you control 5 or more Earth monsters. You can only use each of the following effects of Vernicified in Full Bloom once per turn. You can banish one Avernus Life and the Flower Buds from your hand or graveyard, special summon one Avira the Avernus Life Goddess from your deck. If Avernus Life monster is special summoned from your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can target one monster on the field or in either graveyard, return it to the hand. This is the design on the field spell, so that's actually quite decent, and provided you have 5 or more monsters on your field, all of your monsters gain an additional 1000 attack points. This can be a good way of closing out games, as that much additional damage, unless your opponent has really padded up their life points, can't be mitigated against. By banishing Avernus Life and the Flower Buds from the hand or the graveyard, you get to straight away just bring out the boss monster, which is the Avira the Avernus Life Goddess, from the deck, and there are no other conditions of that. It's not that the Avira becomes negated or it cannot attack, it just simply is returned from the deck onto the field. If Avernus Life monster is special summoned from the graveyard, you can also target a monster on the field or in either graveyard, and that gets returned to the hand. So it's a way of either recovering one of your resources or a way of disrupting your opponent by sending one of their cards back to their hand. Avernus Life and the Changing Season is a normal trap card. Target one Avernus Life monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand, or special summon it. During your opponent's turn, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, if you have no cards in your hand, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Special summon as many Avernus Life monsters as possible with different names from your graveyard, but return them to the hand during your end phase. You can only use each effect of Avernus Life and the Changing Season once per turn. The effect allows you to take a Avernus monster in the graveyard, and that gets either added back to your hand, or you can special summon it to your field. Provided during your opponent's turn, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, by having no cards in your hand and banishing this card, you can special summon a variety of different monsters as possible with different names from the graveyard, but those get revived to the hand and recovered during the end phase. That's fine, as even if you can't really utilize those Avernus Life monsters that well, by returning them to the hand means you've got access for the next turn, whereas if it had been sent back to the graveyard, it might be trickier to bring those cards onto the field. Avernus Life and the Flower Buds is a normal trap card. Its effect is target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of earth monsters you control with different names that were special summoned from the graveyard. Return earth monsters you control to the hand equal to the number of targets, and if you returned at least one to the hand, return the targeted cards to the hand. You can only activate one Avernus Life and the Flower Buds per turn. Avernus Life of the Flowering Fields is a attribute fairy type level 3 with 600 attack and 1600 defense. Your opponent cannot target Avernus Life monsters you control with card effects. You can discard this card and one monster or Avernus Life card, add one earth monster from your graveyard to your hand except Avernus Life of the Flowering Fields. Then you can special summon one earth monster from your graveyard. Also, you cannot activate non-monster effects for the rest of this turn. You can only use this effect of Avernus Life of the Flowering Fields once per turn. This has the ability to protect your Avernus Life monsters from card effects, and by discarding it and an additional monster, you can search for an earth monster from your graveyard and recover it back to the hand. In doing so, you can also special summon an earth monster from your graveyard, but at the cost of not being able to use non-earth attribute monsters' effects for the duration of that turn. Bee Trooper Scout Buggy is a wind attribute insect type level 3 with 1000 attack and 300 defense. You cannot special summon monsters except insect monsters. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon one Bee Trooper Scout Buggy from your hand, deck, or graveyard. You can only use this effect of Bee Trooper Scout Buggy once per turn. It might not seem like a powerful card in that it only has attack points, but as soon as it's normal or special summoned, you can then special summon another copy of itself, be that from the hand, the deck, or the graveyard. This lets you go into various link monsters or into a rank 3 Xyz monster, but they have to be insect types. So the more insect type monsters we have that reach these conditions, the more powerful this card becomes. It also has a way of kind of flushing out the main deck, and so keeps you alive in the duel for longer and avoids you from drawing into cards you just don't need. Bee Trooper Scale Bomber is a fire attribute insect type level 3 with 1200 attack and 2000 defense. If an insect monster is normal or special summoned to your field, except during damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. When a monster your opponent controls activates its effect, as a quick effect, you can attribute one insect monster, destroy it. You can only use each effect of Bee Trooper Scale Bomber once per turn. Provided an insect monster is normal or special summoned to your field, you are able to straight away special summon this card from your hand. And if a monster your opponent controls just tries to activate its effect, by attributing an insect monster, so it can be either itself or another monster, that gets destroyed. So it's a good way of negating your opponent's monster's effects. Bee Trooper Sting Lancer is a wind attribute insect type level 7 with 2400 attack and 1800 effects. During the main phase, as a quick effect, you can target one insect monster in your graveyard and one monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, place the targeted monster on the bottom of the decks. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Bee Trooper Spell Trap card from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Bee Trooper Sting Lancer once per turn. Provided you have a insect monster in your graveyard and there's a monster in your opponent's graveyard, you can instantly special summon this card, and those two cards then get placed on the bottom of those two decks, so one goes to yours and one goes to the opponent. When this card is normal or special summoned, you're able to search for any Bee Trooper Spell Trap card from your deck to your hand, so it doesn't really have too much of a cost on it. Its summoning doesn't need you to get rid of any cards. If anything, you're just recovering a card to bring this card out. And if your opponent has pitched a particular card in their graveyard for a reason, then having it at the bottom of their deck is going to make it a lot more difficult for them to research for that card. The searching ability for a Bee Trooper Spell Trap card helps to add to consistency of the deck, and for an almost free summoned level 7 monster, 2400 isn't bad for an attack stat. Bee Trooper Assault Roller is an Earth attribute insect type level 4 with 1600 attack and 1400 effects. You can special summon this card from your hand by banishing one insect monster from your graveyard. You can only special summon Bee Trooper Assault Roller once per turn this way. It gains 200 attack for each insect monster you control except this card. When this card is destroyed by battle, you can add one Bee Trooper monster from your deck to your hand except Bee Trooper Assault Roller. You can only use this effect of Bee Trooper Assault Roller once per turn. The first part of the effect allows you to just special summon this card by banishing a different insect monster from your graveyard. That prevents you from eating up your... You do so, this card gains 200 attack for each insect monster you control, so that's fine. As if you include itself, that's a 1800 attack monster, plus... Oh, actually, this is except this card, so you do need to have other insect-type monsters on the field to gain any boosts. When this card is destroyed in the battle, you can just search for a Bee Trooper monster, and that goes from your deck to your hand. So that's also another consistency bump for the deck. Bee Trooper Light Flapper is an water attribute insect type level 6 with 2000 attack and 2200 effects. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can target 2 of your Bee Trooper monsters with different names that are banished and or in your graveyard. Add them to your hand. But for the rest of this turn, you cannot activate their effects or the effects of cards with their names. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can return this card to the hand, and if you do, negate that attack. You can only use each effect of Bee Trooper Light Flap once per turn. This has okay attack and defense for a level 6 monster, 2000 and 2200. Provided this card has been normal or special summoned, you can target 2 of your Bee Trooper monsters with different names that are either banished and or in the graveyard, and they get recovered back to your hand, so it's a good way of recovering monsters. But for the duration of the turn, you cannot activate their effects, so even if you were to bring them out, they can't really do anything outside of their attacks. And when an opponent's monster declares an attack, by returning this card to the hand, you are able to negate that attack. This can be useful if it's going to attack into one of your monsters that you need to protect over this card. Heavy Bee Trooper Mighty Neptune is a Earth attribute insect level 8 with 3000 attack and 3000 effects. It cannot be normal summoned or set and must first be special summoned from your hand by shuffling 3 of your banished insect monsters into the main deck. During the main phase, if this card is in its own control is destroyed or banished by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon this card. You can only use this effect of Heavy Bee Trooper Mighty Neptune once per turn. Once per turn during the end phase, you can target one other insect monster you control. It gains 1000 attack. This card cannot be normal summoned or set, so that's a bit of a weakness on it. It has to shuffle 3 of your banished insect monsters into the main deck. Bee Trooper archetype lets you do that relatively easily, and even some of the generic insect support does the same thing. But it does pretty much rely on you having to meet this condition at least to bring it out. During the main phase, provided this card is destroyed or banished by an opponent's card effect, it can be special summoned, so it does have recovery and it can force the wastage of your opponent's effects. And each turn during the end phase, you're able to just target another insect monster, and that gains 1000 attack points. This is a permanent ability, and it can be activated during each of your turns. It is only during the end phase, and so boosts are going to happen after your battle phase. You have to really just wait until your next turn to apply the attack boost and use it during your battle phase. Ultra B Trooper Absolute Hercules is a Earth Attribute Insect type fusion effect monster. It's a level 11 with 4000 attack and defense. It requires 4 insect monsters, and after this card is fusion summoned, it is unaffected by other card effects until the end of your next turn. At the end of the phase, you can target 1 insect monster with 3000 or less attack in your graveyard. Special summon it. You can only use this effect of Ultra B Trooper Absolute Hercules once per turn. This needs 4 insect monsters in order for you to fusion summon, so it's quite a lot of investment into one particular card. But given this, as soon as this card has been fusion summoned, it is unaffected by other card effects until the end of your next turn. So it provides you with at least a couple of turns to use this card without your opponent really having any threats against it, outside of if they are able to make a large monster. But that has to be over 4000 attack to compete. At the end of the battle phase, you can target an insect monster with 3000 or less attack points in the graveyard, and it gets to be special summoned to your field, so it has a form of recovery. And this can be consistently used during each of your turns. It is at the end of the battle phase, and therefore those cards cannot be used to attack at that point, but you'll still have them likely into your next turn. B Trooper Cruel Saturnus is a Dark Attribute Insect type fusion effect monster. It's a level 5 with 2400 attack and 2000 defense. It requires a B Trooper monster and an insect monster. You cannot special summon monsters except insect monsters. You can only use each of the following effects of B Trooper Cruel Saturnus once per turn. If this card is special summoned, you can add 1 B Trooper card from your deck to your hand. If an insect monster is banished face up except during the damage turn, you can target 1 of your banished B Trooper monsters and special summon it. This card requires you to have both a B Trooper monster and an insect monster in order to bring it out, so it does need both the archetype and the same type. You cannot special summon monsters except insect monsters, so it does lock you into insect monsters whilst it's on the field. And you can only use its effects once per turn. As soon as this is special summoned, so that can actually be either from its initial fusion summon or being revived from the graveyard, you can search for a B Trooper card from a deck and add that straight to the hand. If an insect monster is banished face up, you are able to target 1 of your banished B Trooper monsters and get it special summoned to your field. So it's a way of recovering your resources. B Trooper Armorhorn is a Earth Attribute Insect Link 2 monster. Its link points are the top and the bottom with 1000 attack. It requires 2 insect monsters. You cannot special summon monsters except insect monsters. You can only use each of the following effects of B Trooper Armorhorn once per turn. During the main phase, you can immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon 1 insect monster. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 3 other insect monsters from your graveyard. Special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. Summoning on this is quite generic. It just needs 2 insect monsters. Doesn't have to be specific levels, just the specific type. This does restrict you from special summoning anything outside of insect monsters, and you can only use its abilities once per turn. It grants you the opportunity to normal summon a insect monster each and every turn, in addition to your normal summon set. And provided this card is in the graveyard, just by banishing 3 other insect monsters from your graveyard, this can be special summoned back to your field. You do that so you can link climb into the higher link monsters. But keep in mind that when it has been used again or sent to the graveyard for any reason, it actually gets banished when it leaves the field. Giant B Trooper Invincible Atlas is a Earth Attribute Insect type link monster. It's a link 4 with the points the top, the bottom left, the bottom right, and the bottom. It has 3000 attack and needs 2 more insect monsters. While this link summon card has 3000 or less attack, your opponent can target this card with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. You cannot special summon monsters except insect monsters. You can attribute 1 insect monster, then activate 1 of these effects. Either special summon 1 B Trooper monster from the deck, or this card gains 2000 attack until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect of Giant B Trooper Invincible Atlas once per turn. The summoning on this just needs 2 more insect monsters, potentially 3 really if you've got one of the link monsters that can treat itself as a higher link. As soon as this card is link summoned, provided this card has 3000 or less attack, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. and it cannot be destroyed by those card effects. The first ability, just by attributing an insect monster, allows you to just special summon B Trooper monster from your deck. That's fine, as it gives you additional advantage. The second ability is interesting because you have to make a decision. Do you want to have this card boost itself to a 5000 attack monster, in which case it will likely clear all of your opponent's monsters? However, if you do that and you risk that, given that they might have set cards on their back row, this removes the immunity from being targeted or destroyed by those card effects, as it will now exceed those 3000 attack points. It's a decision you have to make carefully before activating it, as it also requires you to tribute another monster, therefore kind of using up your resources. B Trooper Formation is a field spell card. You can target one B Trooper monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but it cannot attack this turn. Also, you lose life points equal to its original attack. If a face-up insect monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon one B Trooper token, Insect Earth level 3 with 1000 attack and defense. You can only use each effect of B Trooper Formation once per turn. The field spell is quite useful for the archetype, as it lets you target a B Trooper monster in the graveyard and it gets special summoned. It is restricted from being able to attack for the turn, and also you take life points equivalent to its original attack. Therefore, if you can actually bring out monsters that have more attack points than your life points, but you're going to be losing the game through that effect. That's the difference. There are some cards that activate which cannot be activated unless you have at least above the life point cost on the card. This just treats it like you're going to take burn effect damage. Provided a face-up insect monster is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can summon a B Trooper token. It's decent attack and defense for 1000 each, and that can hopefully let you go into various link upgrade monsters. It has a replacement type of effect, as though you've lost one of your monsters. B Trooper Descent is a normal spell card. The effect is to special summon one B Trooper token. It's an Insect Earth level 3 with 1000 attack and defense. Then, if you control an insect monster with 3000 or more attack, you can destroy one other spell trap card on the field. You can only activate one B Trooper Descent per turn. This card is able to generate a token for you, which can hopefully let you link climb into a stronger monster. But you also get a bonus effect if you happen to have an insect monster with 3000 or more attack to destroy another spell trap card on the field. It can be yours if it has a distraction based effect that's been triggered by this card, or it can be one of your opponent's cards. More likely you're going to be targeting one of your opponents. B Trooper Landing is a normal spell card. Its effect is fusion summon one insect fusion monster from your etch deck, using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If this card is in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can banish 2 insect monsters from your graveyard. Add this card to your hand. You can only use this effect of B Trooper Landing once per turn. This is like a polymerization for the B Trooper archetype, which explains why you've got fusion monsters within this deck. You can do so by using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. It's a shame it can't be both, as polymerization lets you go for both. And if this card is in your graveyard, except when it's been sent there during the turn, you can banish 2 insect monsters from the graveyard and this gets returned back to the hand. That's the advantage over polymerization, as that card often has to be recovered through the card effects. And in banishing those 2 insect monsters, it helps you to align different effects to bring other monsters out. B Trooper Fly and Sting is a counter trap card. Its effect is when your opponent activates a monster effect, while you control a B Trooper monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. During your end phase, if this card is in your graveyard and you control an insect monster with 3000 or more attack, you can banish 1 insect monster from your graveyard. Set this card. You can only use 1 B Trooper Fly and Sting effect per turn and only once that turn. Provided your opponent is activating a monster effect and you have a B Trooper monster, you get to instantly negate the activation and destroy it. In the end phase, if this card happens to be in the graveyard and you have a high attack insect monster with 3000 or more attack, it doesn't have to be specifically a B Trooper monster. By banishing an insect monster from the graveyard, this card then gets set. And the nice thing again about this card, lets you reoccur this card, as it doesn't have to be banished when it's been kind of removed from the field.